There is a booth where there is a humanoid robot and there is a human dressed in exactly the same clothing, traditional kind of Tibetan clothing. And I stood there for about 2.5 minutes because I couldn't figure out which one was which.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vasugan. So would I be able to tell the difference between a robot and a human? I don't know. But Jared Perlow did after 2.5 minutes, and he's sharing his experiences with us after he visited an AI conference in Shanghai. Plus, the Tate brothers. Many of you know them from the Manosphere. They are now facing extradition to the UK on multiple charges, including rape. I spoke with Heidi Blake, a reporter for The New Yorker, who did an in-depth investigation on them. That's all coming up. Up first, though, the U.S., Canada, and Mexico just spent the last 3 weeks co-hosting dozens of nations for the World Cup. The leaders of those countries even sat together for the final. But then just one day later, it was all over. On Monday, President Trump started his trade war again, hitting Canada with an additional 50% tariff on a number of goods, from furniture to hockey sticks to cheese. And Canada may not be alone on this one. So when will these tariffs go into effect? Or is this a negotiation tactic by the administration? For this, I want to bring in NBC News Chief White House Correspondent, Garrett Haake. Hey, Garrett.
Hello.
So why did the president hit Canada with this new round of tariffs?
Because they hit him second. I mean, this really is almost entirely about retaliation. At the beginning of last year, the president put in place a bunch of tariffs. This is before the so-called Liberation Day tariffs, but he hit Canada and Mexico and China early. Canada was one of the only countries to respond aggressively to those tariffs from the president. They put a bunch of tariffs on American goods. They took other actions, like they stopped buying American wine and liquor in some of their state-run liquor stores. And the president had to sort of start a clock to use this other tariff authority that basically just expired, which allows him to punish Canada in the letter of the law here for unfairly targeting U.S. businesses. This is the definition of a trade war. Back and forth retaliation and retaliation for the retaliation against our second biggest trade partner and traditionally one of, if not our single closest ally anywhere on the planet.
There are these wildfires that are raging in Canada, and it's caused some air quality issues here in the United States, in the Midwest, on the East Coast. We now have some new reporting quoting a Trump administration official who insisted on anonymity on a call with reporters that the president told his aides to look into additional tariffs on Canada over these wildfires, and he mentioned it.
I told him, you got to stop these fires from coming in and, poisoning our air. Our air has been poisoned. I have a good relationship with Mark Carney, but, we got to stop the fires up there. If we can help them, we'll help them. But maybe they should pay us some damages or something, or we should do some tariffs.
What more do we know about that, Garrett?
Look, this is, I think, a very good example of, to President Trump, the kind of, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. He doesn't have a ton of tools to compel, especially allies around the world, to do the things that he wants them to. He doesn't like to do the traditional thing of working together with these people. And tariffs are, in some ways, a blunt instrument that can be, depending on the law and the ways that the administration can find to interpret them, fairly quickly deployed to encourage behaviors or to punish behaviors, or just hung out there as a threat. And the idea of a tariff relating to forest management in another country, on its face 2 years ago would have sounded absurd, but that's part of the way the president looks at the world, and it's the favorite thing he has in his toolkit. So if there's a way to apply it, he's certainly going to try.
Here's the thing, though. There are definitely people that are listening right now, and they're thinking, wait a minute, there was a Supreme Court decision back in February that struck down most of the president's sweeping tariffs. His 10% kind of global tariff is set to expire on Friday. So does the president, with this Supreme Court decision in place, does he even have the authority to institute these tariffs? And if he does, how?
Well, here's a lame answer. It depends. On the tariffs that he threatened to put on Canada today, he does appear to have that authority because there's all these different legal authorities for tariffs. The president can employ them for a variety of different reasons, and all of them come with different constraints. So the ones that he was putting in place or threatened to put in place on Monday involve targeting a country that seemed to be unfairly targeting the United States. So in this case, he makes the argument that Canada's trade actions, not buying liquor, putting tariffs on American goods, is not something that Canada does to Brazil or to Mexico, so we can go back at them because they went back at us first. Now, technically, we went at them first. That could turn into a legal challenge, but at least it gives him a reason. The same thing with some of these things like sector-specific tariffs, like on all things aluminum or whatever. Like, there are different authorities that allow for those kinds of things. What the Supreme Court said is not allowed is you can't call everything an emergency and slap emergency tariffs on different countries willy-nilly, basically. Like, that's not how this works. Trade deficits alone are not an emergency. But the White House and the administration have a lot of lawyers, and they're smart people, and they are searching through U.S. code and trade rules to find different ways to apply these. The president still does have a lot of authority on these tariffs, but it is slower and more cumbersome than the emergency methods that the Supreme Court said he can no longer employ.
And it seems like he wants to employ these tactics elsewhere. He's thinking about employing tariffs in other countries aside from Canada, too.
Absolutely. I mean, again, this is something that the president views as his best tool to impose his will globally in places where he's not going to bomb somebody, right? I mean,
right. It's a threat. It's an economic threat.
And it's not the way presidents have typically done business with allies. I mean, there are a million other ways to get what you want diplomatically on the world stage, especially with people with whom you have deep and lasting ties.
You talk about how this process is more cumbersome and this kind of waiting period. Is this a negotiating tactic on behalf of the president? And I only say that because of what we saw happen with China and the back and forth there.
Everything with President Trump is a negotiating tactic, or at least a negotiating opportunity. I mean, this is someone who makes the point that, like, the deal is never done. You never really walk away from the table. You see it in every aspect of his life, going back to his time in business, to his first term as president. Everything is at least open for discussion. And so in some ways, these clocks, these 30-day or 60-day time limits almost work better, because from the president's perspective, you get the threat and the deadline without the market upheaval that comes with slapping a tariff on one trading partner or globally, and then watching trillions or billions of dollars of wealth evaporate when the stock market freaks out. Now, a lot of this is priced in, where the markets, think, the taco phenomenon that we've talked about before,
right.
The idea of Trump always chickens out, or, yeah, this is a threat, but maybe it won't really happen. And there's this long tail window for the adults in the room to get together and figure out a way out of it. And we're already seeing that possibility with Canada, where Prime Minister Mark Carney told reporters there in Canada that he's already spoken to the president once about this and that they want to try to find a solution.
Garrett Haig, thank you.
You bet.
So you might know controversial social media influencers Andrew and Tristan Tate as part of the so-called manosphere, an often misogynistic social media movement. In the 2024 election, they helped rally support for President Trump's campaign amongst young men. But the Tate brothers have also faced a wave of sexual assault allegations and charges in the UK, including rape and human trafficking. They are now under arrest in Miami, and British authorities are trying to extradite them after bringing a new set of rape charges against them. The Tates deny committing any of the alleged crimes. But how did the brothers become so much a part of the MAGA movement? And what does their arrest say about the administration's support now? For more on this, I want to bring in Heidi Blake. She is an investigative reporter for The New Yorker, and she wrote an in-depth article about the Tate brothers last month titled Andrew Tate's Empire of Abuse. Heidi, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
I want to talk about the Tates' beginnings, because they started out as kickboxers, but they really made their money building this webcam porn business. Why have they been able to rise so high?
Well, I think Andrew Tate, as he amassed this huge fortune in webcam pornography and began to kind of develop a social media fortune, did show a real flair for pop culture provocation. And, like his first posts online, one of his first big viral controversies was a series of pot shots he took at fans of Star Wars, which kind of went super viral as lots of fans got outraged and retweeted it. And so he figured out lots of different ways of kind of like throwing grenades into the social media ecosystem and causing a big stir, causing controversy, getting a lot of attention.
But he became, in a way, proud of saying, this is how you control women. This is how you make money off of women. This is how you should treat women, right? In addition to that.
That's right. And so he went super viral tweeting that women should take responsibility for being sexually assaulted in 2017, kind of at the height of Me Too. And then he began to parlay that controversy into a sort of political identity, this sort of natural disdain for women that he had and that's been very evident in his own life and his own behavior, kind of began to actually attract followers. He cultivated links with Donald Trump Jr. He started going to the Conservative Political Action Conference and making links with other prominent right-wing figures. He became, a real darling of the MAGA movement as Donald Trump rose to power. And when he was deplatformed in 2022, a lot of social media sites kicked him off because his misogynistic teachings and preachings were becoming so extreme that he was ejected from mainstream social media. He was hailed across the MAGA movement as a free speech martyr. People like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens spent hours and hours of airtime defending him and kind of holding him up as as like a champion of traditional masculinity and, someone who just like stuck up for alienated men in the world. When really what Andrew Tate has been preaching for a very long time is blatant violent misogyny, is using sexual violence as a way to control women. And he's been, out there talking about choking women till they can't breathe as a way to control them during sex and things like that very explicitly for a long time. And so it's pretty amazing that he's kind of managed to gain the political currency he has when he's out there saying those things so explicitly.
Last year, there was a travel ban against them in Romania. You mentioned a friendship that the Tates have had now for some time with Donald Trump Jr. They've befriended Barron Trump, the president's son as well. Elon Musk has come out in defense of them, I should say. Did those relationships to political figures, to tech titans, to the Trump family, the president's family, did they play a role in Romania lifting that travel ban against the brothers last year?
Yeah, I think they absolutely did. What's kind of clear from my reporting is that Romanian officials were very perturbed by the fact that after Donald Trump was re-elected in 2024 with substantial support from Andrew Tate, Andrew Tate really mobilized young men to come out and back Donald Trump in a way that was, really impactful in securing his re-election. And in the weeks and months that followed that, many prominent figures within Donald Trump's orbit, Donald Trump Jr., Elon Musk, Tucker Carlson, all came out and backed Andrew Tate, made clear that they did not support the Romanian case against them. Donald Trump Jr. called it absolute insanity. And Richard Grenell, Trump's special presidential envoy, very publicly made clear his support for the Tate brothers, but also we know raised it directly with the Romanian foreign minister at the Munich Security Conference. And, what I established in my reporting was that then a couple of days after that, Romanian prosecutors reached out to the Tate brothers' lawyers and said, what do the Americans want? And their lawyers said, we need the travel ban lifted. And so that travel ban was lifted as a direct result of that American pressure. And so within days, the Tate brothers were on a plane to Florida. And shortly after arriving in the US, yet another woman reported that Andrew Tate had sexually assaulted her, beaten and strangled her in a hotel room in the US. And so, that was like the direct result of this travel ban being lifted is yet another woman is now saying she was subjected to sexual violence by these men. And so, it's pretty astonishing now to see this change in the Trump administration's disposition towards the case in these recent days.
We should note that the White House has denied any direct role in bringing the Tate brothers to Florida and that Andrew and Tristan deny the allegations against them. So now British law enforcement has brought additional charges of rape against the Tate brothers. How do the new charges compare to previous ones, and why were they brought now, from your understanding, Heidi?
Well, the new charges that the British authorities have brought relate to another group of victims. So these are women who they say the Tate brothers abused between 2010 and 2017. There are, against both brothers, new claims of rape as well as trafficking. But there are also 19 new charges in relation to making indecent images of a child. And that was at the center of the work that I did on this case, was looking into their their recruitment and exploitation of this young Slovakian teenager I've mentioned. He was the very first webcam worker who joined the operation. I pointed out in the piece that this woman, she was 17 when she began making this content. Clearly, under child pornography laws, that is illegal. The British authorities have now decided to add 19 charges of indecent imagery of a child. And, they've decided to make this extradition request of the US.
You mentioned there's a turn of events when it comes to Trump world, the Trump camp, the relationship that the Tate brothers have had with the president's son, Don Jr. How has their relationship changed when it comes to the Tate brothers?
I mean, it's been clear up until this point when I was reporting the story, the administration, the figures around the administration had been supportive of these brothers and had really sort of boosted this idea that this was a political smear campaign against them. We now know that this extradition request from the UK has had to go through State Department and DOJ to get to the place where it is now, where, they are before a federal court. And, in terms of the briefing that's coming out of DOJ and State Department, their lawyers have tried to claim that this whole thing was approved by some low-level functionary who didn't really know what he was doing. But the briefing that is being reported by CNN and elsewhere is that, the DOJ is saying, no, this was approved by leadership. And, State Department is saying that Marco Rubio is not going to get involved in this case or in their attempts to resist the extradition. So reading those tea leaves at the moment, it seems like no help is coming from the Trump administration. And I think that is a bit of a shock to the Tate team and to their lawyer. I think they've been really banking on the support of the administration. And it seems now they may just have to face justice in the ordinary way, like any ordinary person. I don't think that's what they expected.
Heidi, it is an incredible piece of reporting in the New Yorker. Thank you for this piece. Thank you, Heidi.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
So AI-powered robots are becoming a lot more common, especially in China. They're sorting packages, they're breakdancing, they're even, get this, playing traffic cop at an intersection. And the country's hope of dominating in this, what seems to be new world order, was on display at China's World Artificial Intelligence Conference in Shanghai. And NBC News reporter Jared Perlow was there to witness it all. Hi, Jared.
Hello. Hi, Yaz. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. So I know robots were a major part of this conference. What was some of the weirdest stuff that you saw that we should all be a little nervous about coming to a home near us?
We have plenty of options to choose from. Well, first of all, there were hundreds of different humanoid robots, many different artificial hands. Really just think of any sort of robot shape, it was there. There were booths of those kind of exo hands, so kind of like a latexy, like skin-like texture, and then there were hundreds of actual mechanical like apparatuses that would basically go, the skin would be like a glove you put on top of that. So the idea is you have something that can move with like all these different degrees of freedom, just like a human hand, and then you put this fake layer on top of it to make it seem even more human. So that was weird. There was a booth where there was a humanoid robot and there was a human dressed in exactly the same clothing, traditional kind of Tibetan clothing. And I stood there for about 2.5 minutes because I couldn't figure out which one was which.
I see that on the streets in New York City every day. So what else you got?
Yeah, exactly. There was a naked cowboy robot too. I think another highlight, there was like something that looked like a triceratops mixed with a rhino, mixed with one of those four-legged gigantic machines from Star Wars. I think it could carry up to 300 pounds, and it basically lumbered along. It was just walking kind of back and forth very slowly, but it's kind of like a people carrier that you kind of get on. Think of like a mechanical bull, but something that actually moves and has those like robot dog type features. I mean, lots of kitchen robots. They had different condiments out. Like there was one robot that was just making cheese pizzas time and time again. I never saw the pizza actually get cooked, but it would spread out the dough and then it would put the sauce on. So yeah, I think it was a Willy Wonka, a factory type of environment there. You could find anything you wanted.
The Chinese president also took to the stage. What did he have to say about all of this?
Yeah, so the whole thing kicked off. We're talking about the World AI Conference here in Shanghai. So it was the largest gathering, China's largest AI gathering, but it was President Xi's first time addressing this conference. and he kicked it off. He gave the opening ceremony keynote, and he issued a very veiled rebuke of how the U.S. is approaching AI. So historically, American AI companies have offered their systems on a paid basis. You have to go through a company like OpenAI or Anthropic. You have to pay them $20 a month if you want to have, decent answers. President Xi said that China's approach, focusing on freely available systems that anybody can download, they can customize to their own use, that's the way of the future. And he explicitly said that we shouldn't prioritize the national security concept to benefit any one country's stability at the expense of all other countries. And of course, there he's referencing how the US has recently been approaching making their models available for other countries around the world. Currently, American models from OpenAI, from Anthropic, are not accessible. They're banned in mainland China. So President Xi basically said, we're not going to go down that route. We think we should make sure there's an AI future where everybody can access these models. And in that speech, he referenced the work that China's doing, making AI available to developing countries. In the hall where I was, there were, delegates from all over the world, from Tanzania, from Togo, from Zambia, many, countries in sub-Saharan Africa. The leaders from Cambodia, from Kazakhstan were also at that speech and basically, came together saying this is going to be a regional effort to ensure that AI benefits everybody and not just the country that's developing it.
Could a Chinese AI company potentially outcompete the Anthropics, the OpenAIs of the world?
I think that is the question of the day, as you hit the nail on the head. The day before President Xi spoke, a Chinese AI company called Moonshot released its most powerful system that, from all independent evaluations, goes toe-to-toe with the most advanced models from American AI companies. And that it was a bombshell development. And in the past 3 days, several other Chinese companies have released similarly powerful models. So it seems like we're now at a point where Chinese models can compete basically at the same level as the most advanced American models. So we even saw today that there are some American AI CEOs who are sounding the alarm. They're saying this is a 5-alarm fire because Chinese AI companies that offer their products for free can offer consumers the exact same capabilities that American models provide. So why would I pay $100 a month for an American system when I can, use a Chinese system for free?
Jared Perlow, thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right, that's going to do it for us at Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vasugian. We'll be back tomorrow with whatever the day may bring. And if you like what you saw and you heard, press the subscribe button. We'll see you tomorrow.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.